Hey everyone, would you like to paint this beginner-friendly snow landscape with me? If you're anything like me, you're scared to paint snow. You think, how do you paint white? Well, the truth of it is that you're using very little pure white. It mostly is darker shades of gray and blue. Only your most highlighted portions will you use pure white to imply the brightness of the sun shining on the very tipmost points in the snow. For materials, I am using a 6" by 6" piece of bamboo mixed media paper, 265 GSM by Hahnemuhle. I've cut one of these rectangular strips and using the leftover as a test paper. This will help test how much water you have in the mix before painting with it, as well as the color. I've got 2 water cups, one for cleaning the brush between colors and one for clean water when mixing. You'll also need a paper towel or a reusable towel that you don't mind getting stained. This will be used to dry the brush whenever it's needed. I use a glass palette. It's my favorite that I've found. You can use any art palette, including a paper plate if that's all you have access to right now. Now we get to the fun parts. My favorite brush, and the only one we're going to be using for this piece, is a 1/2" angle shader. I use the Princeton Aqua brand, and I've had this brush for years, and it is still holding up so well. I have a mechanical pencil, but we're only using it for one line, so decide if you actually need it. Now let's talk color, my favorite part. Here's a Prussian blue. This will be our primary color for the snow and trees. We've got white. That'll be used in almost every mix. We've got a lemon yellow. You can use primary yellow. It's just going to change the vibrancy of your sun and highlights. Either is going to work beautifully. I also decided to pull my turquoise color. It will add a little bit of interest in the undershade of the snow that you won't find in the sky or trees. However, this is not necessary. You could use primary blue if you wanted to, or not at all. You'll be okay either way. The last color we'll need is black. I'm using ivory black. This will be good in the shadows as well as the deepest tone of the trees. And now it's time to start painting. First, add some Prussian blue, white, and a little bit of your yellow to your palette. If you've decided you'd like the reference line, we're going to draw a slope from 2/3 up on the left side of the page downward about 1.5 inches. This will make sure that we don't extend our sky too far below. Now let's start painting. Use some white with a little dot of Prussian blue to get your deepest part of your sky. Remember, it's easy to add a little more Prussian blue, but much more difficult to add enough white to make it light again, so go easy. Once you've got the deepest blue situated, add more white. Let's get some lighter sky just below this deepest portion. Let's blend the colors with a clean, damp brush. Scrub gently, and it will help you transition the colors more smoothly. Take some of your yellow, add some white, and let's draw in that beautiful sun. You want your most vibrant color just in the center of the piece. Add some more white to the yellow and create a more pale ring around that sun that you just finished. You'll see I left a strip without paint. This is going to be filled with pure white. The pure white will help us transition between the blue sky and the illuminated sunrise yellow. Then I'll take a clean damp brush to smooth and blend once again. I wanted to add a little bit more of that deeper Prussian blue in the corners, just for my personal taste. Feel free to do so if you've overblended like I have. Something about this sky screamed for the suggestion of clouds. Take some pure white, the littlest bit of blue, and then just draw blobs in general linear cloud shapes. Now you can reach for that turquoise if you've decided to have it on your palette, and we're going to paint the snowy base. Add a little bit of your turquoise to pure white, and then mix in some Prussian blue. This is going to give you a little bit more vibrant tealy color. Our goal here is to undercoat the entire rest of the piece. I keep adding white, turquoise, Prussian blue in different levels. This is giving me a bit of a gradient, and any of that different coloration as well as texture is just going to enhance the final piece. So don't worry if it doesn't feel even, trust me. Next, we're going to create a mixture of black and Prussian blue. Add some white to this mixture to make the shade of our most distant trees. Draw in some small stems that are references for how high you want each of your trees to go. Now use some rough, scrubby shape in the traditional triangular pine shape to get the suggestion of far off trees lit by the sun behind it. Now let's work on defining the slope. We're going to have outcroppings of trees on the left and right side of the page, so I want to define the slope and give it some character before we cover up both sides. Using the same mixture that we used for the distant trees, add white for a highlighter color for snow, and Prussian blue plus a little black for more shadowed. Play with adding these colors in sloped lines heading from the left side of the page downward to the right. I've added in some extra Prussian blue to get a little bit deeper blue shadow. Now I'm adding more white to work back on the highlights. Have fun with your different colors here, working with both highlights and shadows. Once you're happy with your rough colorations, you can take a damp brush and loosely transition the color together to make it more smooth in places. Don't worry, we're not done with this slope. We're going to add depth and highlighting to it closer to the end of the piece, but this gives us something to work with. Now for the exciting part, the trees in the foreground. One of the scary parts about painting is painting over things you already like. It's a bittersweet part of the process, and you have to trust it. I want you to mix a very deep black and Prussian blue. This is going to be your most shadowed color for your trees. Starting at the tip of your tree, draw a reference line, and then make a similar shape to what your background trees looked like. Your triangular, rough, pine-looking trees. Add in another straight reference line for an even larger tree a little bit closer. Don't worry if your trees start to turn into one big blob of dark texture. This is okay. When we start to add layers of highlights, you'll begin to see more definition on individual trees. Now let's jump to the left side of the page and do more of the same. Start with a straight reference line. We're going to add 2 larger trees on this side of the page. Now that we have our trees in, we can see where the deeper shadows need to fall below. Take some of that dark tree mixture, add some white, and then begin to add this deeper shadow below. Think about the angle the sun is hitting at. We're going to see the shadows on the left of the leftmost trees and on the right of the rightmost trees, the sun coming from the center of the page. Now let's add some white to this mixture and work on the highlights again. This is one of my favorite parts. When you start adding these highlights, it really makes the piece start to come alive. With this first layer, we're going to have snow visible on pretty much the entire tree. This isn't your highest highlight. It is the highlight showing snow on the tree. So imagine this is still shadowed. Let's do the same treatment to those faraway trees. Add a little bit of white and then add some of this lighter colored snow around the tips of the trees so that they have some texture. We don't want them to get completely left out. Now we're talking. Add a little bit more white, and then we're getting to the higher highlights. This is when you really want to think about where this highlight is going to fall. We're getting away from the shadows and more toward the points in the tree that are seeing sun directly. Let's only use these whiter light marks where the tree is getting exposed to the sun. Wow, now it is starting to look alive. Now let's address some of that bright light shining on our hills. The highlights on the trees are symbolizing the snow seeing a lot of light. So let's do the same thing to the snow-covered ground. It's going to be the same color. Make sure you hit that horizon line with this color. It's going to lessen the contrast and make it look more natural that the sun is shining on that distant snow closest to the sun. I think it's time to deepen some shadows. Add Prussian blue and black to get your deepest, darkest shadow. Tuck it where the trees would block all sun. Make sure you carry it up a little bit into the tree when you see pieces of lightness showing through, because realistically none of that would be there, and we don't want it to ruin that deep shadow with patches of stray light that don't exist. We're getting to the point in the piece where we can start being fussy. Do we want a little bit more highlight? Well, add a little more white to your mixture and make it so. If you've already gotten it high enough and you don't want it to get any brighter, then you can say your slope is done. I'm going to add a little more myself. This front portion of the piece just screams for there to be something of interest in the foreground. So I'm adding a patch of lightness, and it looks kind of like a plant or something that got frozen in the winter, maybe a little icy. I'm going to take my damp clean brush and loosely draw out the base to help blend it in to the snow. Now I'm just going to jump around the piece, adding some shadows and highlights wherever I see fit, and I suggest you do the same. One technique that I've loved is if you squint at the piece and something seems too bright or too dark, then you know the contrast is too high and you can go in and adjust. Your eyes, when they unfocus, can naturally catch this. I'd say go ahead and give it a try. I wanted to make this little portion of the hill more hilly, so I dragged the white up to give the impression there's a steeper slope there. And now it's time for my true favorite part of the piece. Let's make a mixture of yellow and white. Yellow is a translucent color by nature, so you'll need a considerable amount of white to make it show up correctly. We are then going to brush the most highest highlight of yellow directly onto the tops of these trees. This is showing that the sun is so concentrated in these locations that you actually get that yellow sheen of the sunrise. I love that this functions to warm up the piece and draw you in. We're painting something cold, but you can still feel the warmth of that sun on the trees and maybe even imagine it on your face. You can even go ahead and add a couple small lines on your hills to symbolize the same thing. These highest peaks are catching the littlest bit of that yellow light. Be very careful though, because if you mix it in too much, you're going to get green and need to repaint over it. As before, we can't miss those small trees in the background. Let's add a little bit of this white-yellow mixture to the tips at the edges of the trees, symbolizing that sunlight pouring through any of the crevices at the edges. And there we have it. I think I'm going to call this piece done. Who doesn't love a good tape peel? What a fun little piece. And I hope you're not scared to paint snow anymore. This is my first tutorial on YouTube, and if you'd like more, please like, comment, subscribe, any of those things to show me the love, and I'd love to produce more of this stuff for you.